Hello, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Meriwether and Tharp. Welcome to the program. Glad to have you with us. It's going to be a fun one today. It's Terrence Edwards stopping by later on. We'll talk to the former UGA wide receiver. Always a great thing to be able to do. I will give you a very odd playoff take from an ESPN writer, which kind of explains the uphill climb that certain SEC schools have to convince the rest of the country of this league's true dominance. We'll talk about that on today's show. We will, believe it or not, I'm actually going to say something semi-positive about Dan Mullen today. You may be actually shocked to hear that, but I think you might agree with me when I say it. So we will just have a very good time, and it is so good to have all of you with us. Hope you're getting ready for a fun 4th of July Independence Day weekend. We all deserve that here as the summer rolls along. So what do you say we kind of get that started right now? DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. It begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Meriwether and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So coming up in a couple of minutes' time, I'm actually going to do something that's going to be somewhat shocking. I'm actually going to say something semi-positive about Florida coach Dan Mullen. I'll do that for you here in a moment, and maybe you'll agree with me, maybe you won't in a second, but we'll do that then. Before that, though, let me, speaking of Florida, kind of begin it all this way, that when we started Gator Hater Countdown way back in, I guess it would have been 2016, I guess is when the Gator Hater Countdown officially began. My push to kind of convince Georgia fans they should view the Florida rivalry as Georgia's biggest. We jokingly have said for a number of years that good Georgia fans are Gator haters first and foremost. This was a big push for me. At the time, what I believed is that if Georgia could put that spotlight on Florida as a game that it had to win, as the game that it most wanted to win, that would actually set itself up over the course of the long haul to win more championships, just have more success, that when you measure yourself by an in-state rival like Georgia Tech, a fairly meager program that doesn't really play on the national stage, you could beat them 18 times out of 20, and it would not necessarily guarantee anything for your program. That viewing Georgia Tech as the game that your program must win, in my mind, was just simply not ambitious enough. That you need to shoot a little higher up the food chain than that. That's clearly what Florida was at the time. I think it still is even now. And we wanted to make that push for Georgia fans to get some clarity and view that Georgia-Florida rivalry as the one that's the biggest. And I have to say, and I'm not going to tell you that everything I'm about to lay out for you is because of me. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not an egomaniac, at least I try not to be. But I certainly would have had a gigantic smile on my face if I could go back in time, way back in 2016, and to find out all these years later, now in 2021, the kinds of things that are being said about the Georgia-Florida rivalry, which would have been my dream when I first started pushing Gator Hater Countdown and, be a Gator hater and Eddie the Blind Squirrel and all the fun things that's going to come in relationship to all of that. It would have been my dream to have the conversation that's currently ongoing about the Georgia-Florida rivalry. Let me give you the latest example of this. Yesterday, SEC Country Live, I had a chance to speak to Bill Bender from the Sporting News. Now, Bill is the one that wrote the list of the top coaches in college football that we talked about a little bit yesterday. We're going to talk about that a little bit more on Friday's show. Kirby Smart only 7th on that list. And, we kind of asked Bill to defend the case for Smart being ranked below coaches that he had beaten head-to-head. As I said before, we're going to get into that more on Friday's show. I want to kind of focus in on a specific part of this right now. And in the midst of talking about Kirby Smart and kind of where he ranks other SEC coaches, the fact that Smart is 7th, that Dan Mullen is 8th, what Bill Bender, who wrote this for the Sporting News, said was that it wasn't a coincidence that Smart and Mullen were ranked so close on this list together, that he says, Bill Bender, it's part of the evidence of just how big the Georgia-Florida rivalry has become. And then Bill, neutral observer, national voice, not a guy that has a tie to either team, went so far on SEC Country Live yesterday to say this about the game that we call the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. Interesting stuff from Bill Bender.
If you had asked me what's the best game in college football right now, Florida, Georgia. because it's the division's on the line. They're the two best teams in the division by a lot. You've got two top 10 coaches every year, and it's just a fun game. There's a lot of, and they like to chat a little bit, and that always adds to it. So I think for the foreseeable future, having Kirby and Dan Mullen 7 and 8, that's not a coincidence. They're part of the best game in college football, at least if I was ranking them.
I mean, to me, that's a kind of cool thing to hear, that here's this rivalry, and put aside for a moment the fact that I have evangelized for the rivalry on this show, Georgia fans caring about Georgia-Florida, just the fact that the Georgia-Florida rivalry has grown as much as it has, because I guarantee you this, if you were to go back to 2015 or 2010 or 2005, any 5 or 10-year increment you want to go back to in the recent past, I don't know that you have national writers saying, I think that Georgia-Florida is the biggest game in college football. It was one of the most unique atmospheres in college football, a cool game, the kind of game that a lot of writers, media types aspire to one day attend. But Bill Bender from the Sporting News there, from SEC Country Live yesterday, takes it a different step to say, I think this is the best game in college football. A sport, by the way, that still has an Iron Bowl between Alabama and Auburn, that still has a Michigan-Ohio State at the end of the year. Now, last year, those two teams didn't play at the very end of the year because of the weirdness of the Big Ten, but in a normal situation, they will. There still is a USC Notre Dame, or there's not a Texas A&M anymore, so maybe the landscape is getting a little more open for some of this kind of stuff. But if a guy like Bill Bender from the Sporting News is saying, I think Georgia-Florida is the biggest game in college football, then as many of you and most of you are aware, there are a lot of big games that you are putting the cocktail party ahead of. But here's where this is interesting, and some of you are already aware of this because you're a regular listener to the show. Bill Bender, national writer, isn't the only one to say that as of late, because the idea that Georgia-Florida was and is the biggest rivalry in college football, the idea of that, it'd be hard to make that claim if it was just one national writer alone who's making that case. But it's not just Bill. Let's go back to a couple of, a couple of months ago now. Paul Feinbaum, during an interview, is talking about the mood around the SEC that he's seen on his show, and he strikes a similar tone when it comes to the current view of the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. Once again, very interesting stuff from Paul Feinbaum, in so many ways mirroring what you just heard from Bill Bender. Here's Feinbaum.
I will tell you, it was, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, whenever we went down to the cocktail party for the first time. I have to be blunt. I tried to feign enthusiasm for it, but you guys, we're from the same area of the SEC. That was a foreign occurrence to me. I watched it every year, late October, early November, because Alabama and Auburn usually did not have a big game that day, but it didn't mean a thing. But after going for 4 or 5 years in a row, and listening to Florida and Georgia fans talk like that is the rivalry in the SEC, I understand it more now. It took me a long time to wrap my arms around it. Florida is a member of the SEC, but it's its own entity in many ways. But Dan Mullen understands the game as well as any coach I've seen since Spurrier, and I know he's a Urban Meyer protege, but I swear he's got some I want to check his DNA. He's related to Spurrier somehow.
So that's very interesting stuff from Feinbaum there. He went on in that same interview, that's from WJOX, a sports radio station in Birmingham, to say that it used to be that if you wanted to get callers fired up on his show, you talked Alabama-Auburn. You mentioned those kinds of things. That used to be what you did. But now Feinbaum, in that interview that you just heard there, he went on to say that now if you want to get folks fired up, if you want the phone lines to ring, it's Georgia-Florida. You mentioned that rivalry. You bring that up, and all of a sudden you're going to fire people up a lot more than almost anything else. So Paul Feinbaum, in another interview earlier this spring and summer, echoing what Bill Bender said on SEC Country Live yesterday, that Georgia-Florida is the big game right now. Biggest in the SEC, Feinbaum says. And if it's biggest in the SEC, then just given the footprint this league has, it's arguably, as Bill Bender said, the biggest in the very country. And if you're a Georgia fan, I do think there's a little bit of a source of pride about that your rivalry with your hated foe has taken on the prestige that it has. It's gone from being just a cool game. It's gone from being just the kind of fun thing that dog fans have enjoyed doing for a long time, going back to the time of Larry Munson and talking about those condos and Jekyll Island and St. Simon's and, the great lines from Munson over the years, including the 1980 game throughout all this. It's actually gone beyond that. Now it's this real, true, hated rivalry, prestigious game, SEC East on the line, inside track to an SEC championship and college football playoff berth on the line. I just think that most Georgia fans would say that's a pretty cool thing. However, would Georgia fans also join me in saying this? And I do not enjoy ever, because it is a true rivalry, and around here we believe in the rivalry, the Georgia-Florida rivalry. I don't enjoy ever saying anything good about Dan Mullen. I don't enjoy doing that. But here is the one thing I think I am forced to say for the positive about Mullen, and I'm curious if Georgia fans would agree. Don't you have to give Mullen a little bit of credit for making the rivalry what it is? From the Georgia side of this, I mean, if you've ever watched a movie, read a comic book, anything like that, you don't have a great hero unless you have a great villain. And Dan Mullen has been more than willing during his time at Florida to take on the villain role as the perfect contrast to a guy like Kirby Smart. Remember, it's Dan Mullen who somehow, some way seemed to be a part of a spring game attendance troll of Georgia a couple of years ago. And some of the things that Mullen has said during his speaking tours, his booster club type stuff, the trash talk about Georgia, that stuff's kind of leaked out. Mullen hasn't shied away from that kind of thing. He's the kind of coach that also seemingly allows his players to talk a little more trash, to be a little bit more vocal about their opponent than Georgia's ever going to be. By contrast, here's Kirby Smart, who doesn't try to be as slick, who doesn't try to be as mouthy. Smart has said before, we don't do the trash talk, we do our talking with our helmets on the field. They have drawn a perfect contrast to each other, and that has made the rivalry so much better. So if you're a Georgia fan and you want to look at why the Georgia-Florida rivalry has become as big as it has, to the point that regional TV and radio host, national writer, all touted as the best in the sport at the moment, I do think you have to give Mullen a little bit of credit for that. Now, it's also interesting to say that, if you want to be objective here, that from the Florida side of things, they obviously view the hero-villain part of this completely opposite, right? I mean, to them, Dan Mullen is the hero who doesn't quite have the recruiting chops of Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart's the kind of bully program that, goes around the world pulling all the five-star recruits, getting all the best talent, and Dan Mullen more content to kind of coach up the guys that he has, doing more with less, and that's kind of the hero-villain narrative that gets cast in Gainesville, the exact opposite of the hero-villain narrative that gets cast in Athens. But one way or another, these are, I would say now, two pretty compelling personalities. The way that Mullen goes about his business with his mouth and with his deeds, Smart much the same way. They are very, very different guys, drawing a sharp contrast. And the presence of both of these, for now at least anyway, top 10 coaches in the sport, I do think has made Georgia-Florida a much more interesting rivalry, one of the best in the sport, maybe the very best overall. I'll take guys like Bill Bender and Paul Feinbaum's word for that. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Hello to you, and thanks for being with us. No matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We're on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. Good to be back with our friends in the Classic City again. And, of course, all kinds of podcast platforms, the Apple Player, the Google Player, world-famous DawgNation.com. So many different ways for you to check out our show. I really appreciate you doing that. Big thanks to our friends at Merriweather and Tharp for making it all possible. They're your source for Georgia divorce. Let me tell you what that means. That means that in an audience the size of ours, the divorce process is a reality for so many of you. It's the kind of thing that you find yourself either currently in the midst of or maybe about to go through all of that. Let's face it, sometimes these kinds of holiday weekends where people are off from work and families are home together, unfortunately, while that's a source of great happiness and joy for many people, it's also kind of a reminder for others that this is that likely next step, that the thing that you've tried to do to kind of hold everything together, that it's just not working. If that's the case, then obviously the next step there is to put a strong advocate on your side, going to bat for you, understanding all the ways which the law impacts your situation, and giving you really sharp cogent advice related to all of that. So that's what Merriweather and Tharp is able to do. They're your source for Georgia divorce. You can go on their website, theatlantadivorceteam.com. You can find out all the resources they have available. You can set up that initial consultation, and then you can make the decision to put Merriweather and Tharp to work for you. Your source for Georgia divorce is our friends at Merriweather and Tharp, by the way, who will be with us for DawgNation Invasion. More on that coming up in just a moment. Okay, before I do that, let me give you I'm going to take care of a little bit of business here just for a moment. So tomorrow is Friday. we're heading into the Independence Day weekend. And we've got, some folks taking some vacation time, and around here we want to be able to do that for the people who need to be able to do that. So a little bit different version of our show tomorrow. We will have a show. It will be pre-recorded. Now, it's pre-recorded today, so it's not super dated or anything like that. It's going to be, kind of the moment. The one thing I'm also going to do tomorrow, we've never done this before, but I think it's going to be really fun. For those of you that like to watch on video, if you can join us live tomorrow, maybe you're off from work tomorrow there as well. If you have a chance to join us live tomorrow, I'm actually going to do kind of a live chat on both Facebook and YouTube. I'll have those running concurrently. I'll do a live chat with you on Facebook and YouTube starting at 10 a.m. tomorrow. We'll watch the show along together. We are pre-recording today. Jeff Sintel will be with us. All the normal stuff you've come to expect, we will do all of that tomorrow. And I'm really excited about being able to do that. So if normally you watch early, you can stick around for when we do the comments live. Tomorrow we'll have a chance to interact with each other. We want to try this, just see how it goes. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So join me tomorrow for a pre-recorded edition of DawgNation Daily. That's a live chat from me. We'll talk in the comment section, Facebook and YouTube. We'll watch along together, and we'll just have some fun getting ready for the Independence Day weekend, and of course everything that's going on with UGA football there. I'm really looking forward to do that. Before I bring on Terrence Edwards, let me also say that yesterday was a very successful rollout of our DawgNation invasion to Charlotte. We were able to announce those details, and this is really exciting. We've got a couple of different options available, and it's amazing how fast these tickets are going, which is as predicted here on this. So for those of you who are already going to be in Charlotte, you've got your travel situation already worked out, then you can join us for a tailgate only option there in Charlotte, just steps away from Bank of America Stadium, and we'll hang out together. We'll enjoy some great beverages and some food and all the festivities. There's TVs set up there that day. It's going to be a world-class type tailgate. If you're already going to be in Charlotte, you can get that. But we also have a VIP option there as well. And the VIP option is always incredibly popular for these kinds of things because we're essentially taking care of everything for you. We'll leave out from Atlanta there on that Saturday morning. We will head to Charlotte for the DawgNation Invasion tailgate. You will also have accommodations there that night, Saturday night in Charlotte. And we're all coming back on the bus again on Sunday there as well. By the way, the bus is going to be well stocked, if you get my drift, on the way down. So that's part of the fun there too. The bus ride down is going to be a big deal too. So if you go to DawgNation.com, you can find out more about this, the limited VIP tickets and everything else. Can I see that graphic one more time on the screen? I just want to give a shout out to everybody who's making all this possible. Our friends at the Finnish Long Drink, Meriwether and Tharp, which I just told you about, Kroger, and R.S. Andrews. Everybody there working really hard to make this affordable for all of you, fun for all of you. The bus down going to be a real party. The tailgate itself going to be as big as anything that we've done. The hotel there that night for those of you that do the VIP thing, and then the trip back the next day. Of course, the one thing you should be aware of, and I told you this yesterday, most of you kind of know this already, this does not include game tickets, right? You understand that. This is not a game ticket thing. This is a thing for those who want the tailgate experience, or also those who want the VIP experience, which is kind of tailgate plus travel. For those of you that want that, that's what DawgNation Invasion is. We've done these before. They've always been a ton of fun. I truly believe this one's going to be the most fun we've ever had, so that's going to be a really great time. All right, before we're done today, very odd playoff prediction from an ESPN talking head on television, which I think speaks to the madness that exists sometimes around the SEC in college football, and I believe this could impact Georgia in particular. We'll talk about that here coming up in just a moment, but for now, on everything happening around the world of UGA, great voice to discuss it all with, the former Georgia wide receiver Terrence Edwards. He joins us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp, and glad to have you with us as well.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Say hello to Terrence Edwards, the terrific former Georgia wide receiver. Always fun to have a conversation with him. And, Terrence, I was just speaking before you joined us about the way in which it seems the Georgia-Florida rivalry has grown in recent years with, national writer yesterday on my other show, SEC Country Live, saying he thought it was the biggest game in the sport at the moment. Paul Feinbaum on a recent interview going back a couple of months ago saying that he thought it had become the top rivalry in the SEC, even surpassing the Iron Bowl along its way to doing that. What is it that you think about the current state of the Georgia-Florida rivalry and the intensity that seems to exist between the two teams, the two coaches maybe, certainly the two fan bases? I know you've got friends that played for Florida. What do you make of the way the Georgia-Florida rivalry has seemingly grown in recent years?
It's definitely grown. For someone of myself who's watched this rivalry since my brother played in this rivalry, and just then myself finally playing in this rivalry, you understand what this rivalry means. It is the rivalry that I think shapes the Georgia program. I think in-state with Georgia Tech is a big one, Auburn is a big one, but I think the Georgia fans would love to go 1-12, and as long as they beat Florida, I think all is well. So. It has definitely grown with the element of social media. I think Dan Mullen is a good character. I don't know him personally, but he's a character, and I think Kirby is the polar opposite of him.
Yeah.
And I think that the two guys has a good, healthy competition with each other, and then that spews over into the game. So I love this. I think the Georgia-Florida rivalry week is one of the best ones in the nation. And me personally, I wished that we can alternate venues. I really wish one year we could be in the Mercedes and the next year we could go down to Florida. I would just love that. Just me personally, I would just love if we could alternate venues and just not having in Jacksonville every year.
That's an interesting idea on that, Terrence. And I guess one of the things that I think about, too, as well is, obviously I care a lot about recruiting, and I want Georgia to get great players coming into the program. And to me, it seems like it's just easier to convince great players to come to Georgia if you can show them the great games they're going to be playing in. So when you have added prestige for Georgia-Florida, when you have folks in the media talking about how big of a deal it is, I do think it aids Georgia's recruiting effort, because I think one of the ways in which great players measure themselves is how great of a game, how high a level of competition do you get a chance to go out there and prove yourself in, and that's what Georgia-Florida seems to provide right now, which, as I said before, only would appear to aid Georgia's recruiting efforts. Would you agree with that?
Right. I think so. I think and I really love that Georgia is scheduling the games like Clemson the first game of the year.
Yeah.
And I understand what it takes for these lower level programs to run their programs and need the games like Georgia to fill their recruiting budget and their sporting budget. Period. But I would just love if we played the Clemsons of the world and got matchups that we don't normally see across the country. The Notre Dame matchup was awesome for those 2 years that we played. So I really love those type matchups, especially in the non-conference. And recruits, that's one thing you can spotlight. If you come to Georgia, your first game of the year is going to be against the Clemson Tigers, and we all know what that program represents right now.
Yeah.
So scheduling these games is definitely a big recruiting tool.
You talked about this on social media a little bit yesterday, having some fun with what you would have had a chance to do, cashing in, had the name, image, likeness era existed when you were at Georgia. That kind of rolls out across the country here today. We're seeing some players already making some of their announcements. Georgia players, I think, will be making some announcements here today a little bit as well. What do you think about the rollout of all of this, and what do you think about this new era that is upon us here when it comes to college football?
That's one of the things that I love. I actually wish I could go back and recruit probably some of the money that I could have made back when I played. But I actually love it. I just like the fact that the players now own their name and likeness. I mean, let's just be honest. The school owned the players' likeness and name once they signed that letter of intent, because the players couldn't do anything to make money off their God-given name and likeness. So I like it. I just think now the schools are just going to really have to be very informative about taxes and about all other stuff that may come about. And someone asked me on Twitter this morning, like, would you be able to handle those type things? And as an 18, 19-year-old kid, I'm just worried about depositing the money that I'm going to get,
right,
not knowing about some of the other things that may come along with it, with paying taxes and other things that they might have. So I just hope the schools educate these players on this is what's going to happen, this is what you're going to have to do, or you're going to be a 1099, you're going to have to pay taxes
right
on this money. So, but in all, I like that the players now have been able to control their own name and likeness.
Well, you mentioned the 1099 thing, not to get too deep in the weeds on this, but Terrence, I know you understand this. It's that, a lot of media work, certainly before I came to DawgNation, a lot of that for me was kind of this thing where you're kind of just contracted out to do the job, and you get the paycheck at the end. They're not taking any of the taxes out there on that, and you're kind of left to be on your own devices to get that done. And I got to tell you, that's not the kind of thing earlier in my life I was all that good at either. Now, thankfully, my wife's a CPA, so I at least have a little bit of help around the house when it comes to that kind of thing. But, for a lot of these players, they will be experiencing some of this for the first time, and getting good advice, having good advisors is going to be a part of this. And I'm not saying that to scare anybody off of it. That's not my point here. My point is, though, is there will be a lot of lessons learned along the way. And as I have been reiterating over and over again, that ultimately the quality of your advisor, the people that you have the closest to you and around you, is really going to determine how successful each of these players' own foray into name, image, likeness compensation is going to be. You're only going to be as good as the people you have around you.
Right. And I mean, just something just popped in my head while you were just talking about that. I just think now the schools should hire a CPA that is specifically for these athletes, that they can really go to someone who has the best interest and give them the best information that they need on any kind of taxes or anything that they need. That could be a job that these schools create, because, like you said early on, I was just worried about depositing the money that I got from doing NL appearances. Even, once I start understanding paying taxes after that, the 1099 I didn't know about, just being a contract worker. The company's they're going to file their taxes, and at some point it's going to come back on you. So that may be a good idea, that these schools actually hire an in-house CPA to help these kids navigate through the taxes.
Let me say one more thing about this topic, and we'll shift the gears and discuss something else. One of the things I mentioned on the show earlier this week, and to be totally honest, Terrence, I'm a little bit of an old head, so in some cases I'm a little skeptical of some of this kind of stuff and what the long-term impact is going to be for college football. I can't deny my feelings on that, but if I were to zero in on something I think that could be a true positive beyond just the players getting a chance to put a little folding money into their pocket, it's this. Some of the things that you're seeing right now are players showing up on, I guess, some of these like video game apps, and they'll play video games with a fan, or Cameo is one of these things where you can have a player give you a special birthday message or something like that, where it does seem like for the average fan, one of the things that the name, image, likeness era might provide is more chances for interaction with players and more chances to get autographs. Something that right now, if you want a Georgia player's autograph, if you have a son or a daughter that loves Georgia football, it's hard to get a player's autograph right now. It's a very restrictive process around that, and you kind of understand why that might be the case. But what the name, image, likeness era might provide for the average fan is a little more opportunity to connect with these players, and I think for a lot of college football fans, they will probably view that as a good thing.
I think so. I think you get opportunity now that these players can actually set up their own autograph sign. I mean, social media and Twitter and Instagram is a powerful tool to get information out. And if, put myself back, if I want to say, hey, Terrence Edwards is hosting a autograph signing from such and such time, and this is what it costs. And so it's going to be an opportunity for these players to really engage with the fans, and now fans can go get an autograph, and now players can capitalize on their name and likeness. And just some of the stuff like with the Todd Gurley stuff won't happen anymore. I just think if the rules were in place, Todd would have been able to play, and all the other players that they got suspended for selling their jerseys and rings and stuff. I just don't think those things would have happened, because now you can do that. I would never sell my ring because I worked my butt off for it, so I would have never done that. But now fans can really engage. I mean, these players could put out time and dates that they're going to host their own autograph session. Like, who wouldn't, if JT Daniels decides him and Jermaine Burton or Kendall Milton is hosting an autograph session, the lines will probably be wrapped around the building. Now they can capitalize on it, and fans now can get their autograph.
In the little bit of time we have left with you, I want to mention a guy that you know well. It was nice to see Georgia coach Kirby Smart tweeting out this week that Eric Gilbert was the academic player of the week or whatever it was. And you've seen some positive buzz from him on the field there as well as he's getting ready to work his way onto this Georgia roster here later on this fall. The best that I can tell, Terrence, is it certainly looks like that Eric is off to a great start there at UGA. And I know as one of the advisors in his life, I know how happy you must be to see him making a home in Athens as quickly as he seems to have done so.
Oh, I think so. I think he's very happy. I speak to his mom at least about once a week, and she keeps me updated. And one of the things that she did say to me, I don't think she would mind me sharing, that she says Eric wakes up and go to the Bucksman and stay there all day. He meets with his tutors, so he's very focused. He's still enjoying it. I ask all my players all the time, "Are you still happy? You made this decision, are you still happy?" And I just saw him recently, and he's happy. So that's my most important thing, that he's happy. When he's happy, his academics going to be better, and his athletic prowess is going to be better as well. So he's off to a good start, and he's enjoying Athens so far.
Well, please pass along to the family. I know they know how excited Georgia fans are to have him on the field, but beyond that, the fact that he's feeling comfortable and at home at UGA, the fact that that things are going well for him right now, please pass along how happy we are for him, that he's enjoying himself in Athens as much as he is right now. That's a great thing to see. And also, Terrence, before we let you go, I know you're out there working just as hard as ever, training up those next generation of pass catchers and always looking to get people together, doing some drill work. You've got some great stuff going on. You've had some great stuff going on here over the course of the last few days there as well. So give folks an idea how they can be a part of that if that's something they're looking to do.
Yes, if you have a middle school age child that's looking to learn how to play the wide receiver position, you can reach me on all social media at Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy.
Terrence, hope you have a great Independence Day weekend. Thank you so much for being on the show here today. I appreciate your insight on to Georgia football, all the things going on with the program. It's a really valuable voice. So thanks for doing it with us. We'll look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thanks, B.A.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
A couple of interesting things from Terrence Edwards there that I want to highlight, and then we'll move on. We'll do our SEC Through. First of all, boy, how much do you love hearing Miss Gilbert telling Terrence Edwards that, yeah, Eric is enjoying himself right now at UGA and showing up at that Butts-Mehre Heritage Hall and staying plugged in there all day long. Apparently, according to the Kirby Smart tweet this week, doing great work in the classroom. You would certainly expect great work on the football field there, too. You just love to see that, and it really is amazing. And this is one of the reasons why I think, players love the college football experience sometimes. And this is one of those things that I do think runs somewhat counterintuitive to what we typically expect. We would normally expect, hey, players are happiest when they have the most free time. But sometimes I'm not quite so sure that's the case, that the structured environment created by an off-season schedule of, hey, get your coursework done, get your weight room work done, get your, whatever, 7-on-7 work done or whatever else is going on there. We got a full day schedule for you. I mean, sometimes we're all just happier when we're busiest and when we have a purpose, when we have something we're working towards. It just makes us happier. And that's what college football provides. And Georgia, because of the structure and the professionalism of the organization, seems to be really good at doing that. So I know you'll all join me in saying it is great to hear that Gilbert is off to a good start and enjoying himself there at UGA, and I appreciate the thoughts from Terrence Edwards on that. Here's the other thing that Terrence said. Georgia-Florida, biggest rivalry in college football. Terrence looks at that and says, and because of that, boy, wouldn't it be great to play this game on campus sometimes? And admittedly, even though that's not my feeling, Connor Raleigh shakes the head no. And I'm with Connor on that. I like the cocktail party. But to be fair and balanced here for a moment, that if you do have the best rivalry in college football, obviously bringing it onto your campus, there's a line of thought, well, that's exactly what you should do. And I'm glad Terrence said that because I want a range of opinions, that's shared on this show. I want that. So I think it's fair that Terrence brought that up, and many of you agree. In fact, you can really kind of see the growth of that opinion over the course of the last few years. More people would like to see Georgia-Florida on campus than certainly was true a few years ago. Obviously, one of our colleagues, Mike Griffith, has kind of made that his person. He's like a one-issue voter. Like, that's the thing he brings up over and over again, and a lot of you agree with Mike's perspective on that. However, if I could push back ever so gently, I would say this. is that if we believe Bill Bender, Sporting News, if we believe Paul Feinbaum, SEC Network, that Georgia-Florida has grown into the biggest rivalry in college football, that has happened while these games have been taking place in Jacksonville. So therefore, don't you have to give at least a little bit of credit to the venue, world's largest outdoor cocktail party, and at least a little bit of credit to the 50-50 split into the crowd and the pageantry of the game, the Heart Bridge, and all the different things that folks talk about? Even if it wasn't necessarily Kirby Smart's favorite thing when it first kind of took place, don't you have to give at least a little bit of credit for the venue of the game, for the way in which the rivalry has grown? I believe that's probably the case. I was in St. Simons this past weekend. I was in another of the Golden Isles a little earlier. I got to tell you, I just love that part of the world. I just do. And having an excuse to visit that in October or early November in some cases, that for me is never going to be a bad thing. By the way, speaking of cocktails, how about a ready-to-drink cocktail that comes to you right out of the can? No mixing. It's Independence Day weekend. Like, what you don't want to do is, if you're off from work, you don't want to make your beverage experience this weekend work in itself. So why don't you get something that's ready to drink right out of the can? It's not a beer. It almost looks like a beer because it is in a can. That's where we're conditioned to sort of think of beers being. But this is a ready-to-drink mixed drink cocktail. That means, like if you're watching on video, the blue can you saw there, it's like a citrus flavor, almost like a grapefruit, a gin kick to go along with that. There's a cranberry version of that. There's a long drink strong, a long drink zero. These are ready-to-drink cocktails right out of the can. So good. I tell you, and this is not hyperbole, this is really true, I have had more positive feedback from the finished long drink than almost anything else that we've recently introduced here on our program. It is such a gratifying thing to see so many of you enjoying that. And my encouragement is, put some in your cooler as you're heading to the pool or the lake or wherever you're going here this weekend. Put a little bit of that in your cooler, and not only will you enjoy it, it's going to make you really popular with everybody that you're with, because there's nothing better than telling people about something they may not yet know about. Now, they listen to DawgNation Daily presented by Meriwether and Thorpe. They've obviously heard about the finished long drink. But if you can introduce this to them, this ready-to-drink cocktail right out of the can, they're going to love it. The finished long drink. Go to thelongdrink.com. You can find out where you can pick some up here this weekend. Make sure you check that out. All right, the music has ended, so a little awkward here to just now be starting the SEC through. But let's roll through a couple of stories here really quick just for a moment. Let me start with now this may not be the first. This is just the first that I saw. Barrett Slee tweeted this out this morning. Bo Nix, Auburn quarterback, apparently inking a deal with Milo's Tea. Connor was saying before the show began, there's a little bit of Alabama. Is it a boycott? Is it fair to call it a boycott? A little cancel culture in the state of Alabama from Alabama fans over Bo Nix signing the Milo's Tea endorsement there. But that's Nix there on Instagram. I guess he announced that out. He says, how sweet is it to partner with Drink Milo's for my first endorsement deal. And they did a pretty good job of getting that there pretty quick. So we'll see more of these. In fact, by the time you hear this show, you'll probably have heard a lot more of these. But Nix was among the very first that I saw, at least of players that you kind of know about and sort of think about. And so interesting stuff there when it comes to Bo Nix on that. Also, really quick here for a moment, this was a story that we brought to you yesterday on SEC Country Live there as well. Fallout in Baton Rouge at LSU for the departure of Dare Rosenthal, one of the left tackle, starting offensive lineman for LSU. And Orgeron has spoken about this. We played the audio for yesterday on SEC Country Live. Here's what I'll say about Orgeron and LSU on this. Losing a starting offensive lineman to the transfer portal this late in the summer cycle, to me, and I believe that LSU can be a bounce-back team this season. After a really disappointing 2020, that's on my list of teams that I think could certainly exceed the performance of a year ago and still be a factor in the SEC West. But honesty compels me to admit that this kind of thing is not. I talked earlier about Georgia being very buttoned up and very professional, and the fact they can create an environment for players to kind of spend all day at the football facility, and it actually is a productive experience, and they may be busy on coursework and weight room work and everything else, but there's just kind of an energy associated with that that's positive. This may come across as self-serving, but it's my genuine feeling. Sometimes when I look at the scenario at LSU, I wonder if that's as true as it should be from the perspective of a Tigers fan. When you see all the transfer portal stuff that program has dealt with. Last year, all the opt-outs. And I don't want to make too big of a deal of the opt-outs because we can't really know for sure how much of that was truly pandemic influenced. Obviously, that was a weird time a year ago. But they have had a lot of player departures. And as one of we did the anonymous quote stuff on one of the vacation shows, an anonymous coach saying of LSU that they've had a harder time replacing assistants than a program like Nick Saban Alabama has. Stark contrast between those two programs. I think a lot of that's true. I believe that Ed Orgeron is a good coach. I believe that he's actually a better coach than sometimes he's given credit for. A lot more nuts and bolts, a lot more substantive than the caricature personality would sometimes suggest that he is. But good programs don't lose starting left tackles in July. They just don't do that. That's a very odd thing to have happen, and that's what LSU is kind of dealing with right now. So it's a story worth following. Lines of scrimmage, an issue for LSU, and what's supposed to be a bounce-back year will make that your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, I want to keep the conversation going for a moment. This is a very odd take that I'm about to share with you. It comes from ESPN's Heather Dinich. Now, I don't play this to just kind of beat up on Heather because everybody's got an opinion, and my opinions are frequently wrong as well. But I think it speaks to the issue, the challenge facing a program like Georgia, facing other programs in the SEC, and the fact that there are so many analysts, reporters, whatever else, that simply don't seem to want to acknowledge the gap that exists between the SEC and almost every league in college football. You want some evidence that's true? Listen to Heather Dinich, the ESPN reporter, on Get Up, an ESPN show this week, arguing not for the SEC getting multiple playoff teams here this season, but the Pac-12, Iowa State. Where is this coming from Heather Dinich?
I am on the Big 12 bandwagon, in case you couldn't tell, and it's because of Iowa State. I think that they have a chance at a really special season, and it's because they have two Heisman hopefuls on their roster. Not one, two. Brock Purdy, their quarterback, Breece Hall, their running back. They're spectacular. Matt Campbell has the ability to recruit 3 stars and get them to play like 5 stars. I talked to their tight end, Chase Allen, last week, and he told me that they are a really special team in terms of they actually like each other, right? Now, I say this, and my theory is going to get blown up if they don't beat Iowa. And I think Iowa is a really great team, and they have a chance for a special year under Kirk Ferentz. So I think that that's one of the big questions. If they can get past them, then bring it on, guys.
Heather Dinich talking about the idea of Matt Campbell, the coach, coaching up 3 stars and making them able to go out there and beat the 5 stars, as long as they don't lose to Iowa. Listen, if your playoff prediction could be upended by a team losing to Iowa, then maybe your playoff pick isn't as strong as you think it might be. Here's what I want to tell you, and you already know this. You have a better chance of stumbling out your back door at some point in time this weekend and seeing Bigfoot than you do ever seeing a team win a national championship because it has a coach that coaches up 3 stars that can go out there and beat 5 stars. That is just a false narrative, and yet it persists. And this is one of the reasons why I think in the SEC you need to be glad the playoff is expanding to 12 teams, because there's always going to be this thought of, well, you can't really tell who's really the best team. You know, the Big 12's got a couple of good teams. The SEC's got a couple of good teams. Iowa State would be a touchdown underdog to Georgia and a 10-point underdog at least to Alabama, if not more. And it's not to say they're not a good team. Not to say they can't, beat, any team any given Saturday. You've heard those cliches before. But this is the kind of thing that just doesn't exist in the reality of college football anymore. But for Georgia and these SEC teams that want to demonstrate their superiority, there's just always going to be a resistance to that because of a sort of woebegone notion that some reporters want to cling to. They are interesting stuff from Heather Dinich. Let me very quickly give a shout out to my friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia. ESOG, very easy to get in touch with. Dial them up, 678-ESOG now. They're proud partners of UGA, good friends of ours at DawgNation Daily for a long time. They'll take care of you for your foundation issues, your waterproofing issues. It's raining this week a lot. It's already rained some, going to rain more this weekend. You'll see that water creeping in. Don't put off that work. You know that's a problem that needs to be fixed. Take care of it today. If you see those cracks in your walls, boy, take the next step. Give them a call. Get that seen about. 2 full-time engineers on staff. They'll do good work for you. Our friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia. As we get ready to wrap up here today, I will remind you tomorrow, pre-recorded, but I'll be live in the comments section when it airs at 10 a.m. on both Facebook and YouTube. We'll take your comments. I also want to give a shout out to the College World Series in Omaha, Nebraska, and Mississippi State winning its first national championship in a team sport of any kind before, and really dominating Vanderbilt. I do not like Vanderbilt baseball. I don't like Vanderbilt football anymore either, but I don't like Vanderbilt baseball. After the first inning of the first game of this championship series, Mississippi State just dominated the word go the rest of the way. So kind of nice to see for the maroon version of the Bulldogs on that. Also, our golden shoe, I'm going to give it to the Atlanta Hawks as they get ready to go a Game 5 tonight in Milwaukee, the Eastern Conference Finals. DawgNation Daily is rooting on those Atlanta Hawks. We'll see if they can get that done. How about Gator Hater Countdown for what many are calling the top rivalry in college football? 121 days. Dogs get their revenge. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Good to have all of you with us. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. Glad to have you with us. This is awkward. I can't find... There's one. Excuse me one second. My phone's way over here. Uh-oh. That was smooth as butter. All right, so got the phone in the hand. We'll do some comments. I didn't get tripped up by the wires. So we'll have a good time, and we'll take a lot of comments here today. Let me go Facebook first for a moment, and then because I think I did YouTube first yesterday. So we'll go Facebook first, YouTube after that. We'll do a few comments, and then we'll roll out the door here today. Travis McCullough, happy to see Vanderbilt lose because he doesn't like Skip Bayless. Many people probably agree with the same thing. Matt Rukavina says, can Todd Gurley now get his Heisman Trophy retroactively for the 2014 season? Yeah, the Gurley name comes up a lot here because certainly, I mean, it seemed very heavy-handed at the time to be coming down as hard on him as the NCAA did. I think that, frankly, Georgia could have done a better job of protecting and defending Todd Gurley back then. I thought Georgia kind of laid down on that more than they probably should. You know, look at how FSU treated similar allegations against Jameis Winston, how Texas A&M treated similar allegations against Johnny Manziel. They just were a little more willing to seemingly circle the wagons than Georgia was. I think that Georgia itself actually takes some of the blame for the Todd Gurley thing years ago. But pretty clearly, it seems like, you know, Gurley may be the most recent example of just how heavy-handed all of this used to be. And even though I am somewhat skeptical of how this new era of the sport's going to play out, I mean, there's certainly no part of me that would say, you know, someone like Todd Gurley shouldn't be able to make a few dollars off an autograph. Daniel Aldridge mentioning A.J. Green there as well. Yeah, the Green thing is so weird because, I mean, he's just selling one of his possessions, right? I mean, to think that you would be restricted from being able to sell a possession is just a pretty crazy thing. Xavier Cottle says, by the way, it's good to see Xavier in the comments section. I feel like we haven't seen Xavier much lately. Used to see him a lot. Says, I'm most concerned with athletes remaining focused in the NIL era, especially at the beginning. And I would say in regards to that keeping young people focused is a big challenge anyway. So I don't know that a name, image, likeness concern, I mean, I hate to be, you know, whatever you want to say, you know, simplistic here, but I mean, like, the opposite sex is always going to be the biggest concern, right? It's like, you know, romantic relationships is always going to be the biggest potential distraction for anybody when it comes to something like this. So, you know, I don't know that name, image, likeness becomes a bigger potential distraction than that would be. I mean, I think that Xavier's point of, hey, at the very beginning when all this is so new, that may be the case. You know, eventually, you probably settle into something that feels a little bit more normal. I mean, I'll say of the announcements that we've heard thus far, there hasn't really been anything that has, like, rocked me to my core, right? I mean, it's not like Ford has announced some deal with Spencer Rattler or something like that. That's just not really quite what's going on here. And, you know, we may see bigger things to come in the days ahead, but thus far, most of what you've heard is fairly small in scale. So I think the possibility this ends up not being the kind of thing that has even much potential for distraction, I think that may end up being true. Jerry Popham says, got a few hours. I'll tell you how I really feel for the rest of my life. But all things, he does not like Vanderbilt. That's interesting to see. A lot of people don't. Jamie Kennedy, happy birthday, by the way. Golden shoe winner for yesterday, enjoying himself some Finnish long drink. Says he's going to be enjoying some of that for his birthday there as well. So, Jamie, happy birthday to you. Randy Hall said, did I hear Peaches last night on Jeff's show? No, but you do hear Peaches on just about every show that Jeff does. And a lot of folks really like hearing from the canine version of the Centel family. Jay Riv says he likes the idea of rotating the Georgia-Florida game with Atlanta or something like that. Like, the one thing that I've always believed about Georgia-Florida is I like the idea of always keeping it in Jacksonville. I actually personally don't think the Atlanta thing is kind of an interesting idea at all. I mean, Georgia already goes to Atlanta fairly frequently at the end of seasons. And so, playing another regular season game there, unless it's the kind of cool non-conference game that would otherwise be hard to schedule, if it's not that, if it's not that, I don't like the idea of Georgia-Florida taking place in Atlanta. The one thing I've always believed, and you could tell me this is not true, and you might be right, but I've always believed that once you stop playing Georgia-Florida at Jacksonville every year, I think it becomes harder to play that any year. I mean, part of the fun of the Georgia-Florida is the momentum of fans who know they're always going to be there. Now, last year they weren't there, so maybe we'll see some of this, taking effect right now, but it's that traditional travel that gets scheduled year after year after year. And so, some people have proposed, well, if you did a rotation, you'd give everybody a chance over the course of a 4-year college career to play a game in Gainesville, a game in Athens, and a game in Jacksonville. And my belief is that the Jacksonville mystique would lose some of its pizzazz if you weren't doing it every single year. That if you ever open the door to sometimes not play the game in Jacksonville, that's only a gateway drug to eventually not playing it in Jacksonville at all, which some of you would prefer. That's not my preference on this. I mean, an argument that I've heard that I think is very interesting, Connor Riley made this years ago, which is that there's no doubt that the game becomes harder to win the moment you start playing half these games in a hostile environment. It's easy to imagine how much fun it'd be to play the game between the hedges, but when you take a rivalry that, in recent years, despite last year's loss, Georgia's done really well in, if you put half those games in the future in Gainesville, then the rivalry itself becomes a little bit more difficult to win. Connor Riley, by the way, joins the program.
Mike Griffith is on vacation this week, and we still got to have this debate.
Right. Well,
I thought I was free.
In this case, if Terrence Edwards is going to bring it up, he's got the credibility to make it a conversation certainly worth having. Let's see what else. Interesting conversation going on here in Facebook there as well. Shelton Tucker says I say all kinds of bad stuff. Yeah, every now and then I probably do. I'm probably guilty of that. Keith Vold says I don't want the game in Atlanta. It needs to be home and home. And some people certainly like that. Darius Brown looking forward to the Hawks tonight. Len Johnson Shipman wants to beat Vanderbilt 100-0. I'm right there with you on that. Brian Whitehead says, I wish UGA would set up a trust account with a small stipend for these players where this money is available for them when they go pro or graduate. This will prevent them from being responsible for taxes until they have access to the money. It'll also prevent them from blowing it all and getting to off-campus trouble. So I have a lot of somewhat complicated feelings on that, and I guess part of it is this, is that if we stipulated what you just said is true, that the players might not be, wise with how they'd spend the money they're going to get. I mean, as much as I'm skeptical of name, image, likeness stuff, how the player would choose to use the money they receive is not a reason to withhold the money from them. So, I do have to admit that, and I hope that you can appreciate that. For as strong as my feelings are about my desire to protect amateurism and things like that, the one thing I really want to be careful not to do is present some sort of false argument in favor of that. I mean, overall, I do think extra benefits, the way that Brian kind of described, that are distributed across all players, tapping into those, for instance, think out loud here for a moment. Like, when I was a kid, the basketball coaches getting the contracts from Nike or Adidas or Reebok. Back then, I guess it was Reebok, probably some. Shoe companies like that was a big deal. And even now, most colleges have big apparel deals with these big manufacturers, and that goes to the program. And the old days, it went to the coach directly. Maybe some of that money still does. Why couldn't some of that money go across the board to all players? They're the ones who are actually wearing it. Those are the kinds of things I just be a lot more in favor of. That the thing that concerns me the most about name, image, likeness, one of the reasons why I can't be among the cheerleaders in the media for all this, in addition to the fact that I'm sometimes skeptical of the things they cheerlead for, just knowing what I know. But, beyond that, I really believe that we have a long-standing history of solid advice coming from coaches and the programs themselves. Like, they really are tasked with raising up these young men. If we're going to keep it to football, they're tasked with raising up these young men. And I think the entity of college football, the programs that make up this institution, I think have really, for the most part, done a great job at that. There are obviously counterexamples. There are horror stories at program X or Y or Z, isolated incidents. Totally understand all of that. But by and large, college football as an institution has been a really good mechanism for raising up young men. And the thing that concerns me about name, image, likeness stuff, even if I don't mind players getting paid for their autograph or logos on T-shirts, whatever else, is that the quality of advice that now seeps into the sport, I just think is likely to be less than. And so that's where my I guess skepticism comes from. But like, the one thing I'm not is some sort of hardliner who says, hey, I don't want these players to get an extra dime for anything. I just don't feel that way at all. My thought is, given the trade-off of, allowing them to profit, putting the stability of the sport at risk, obviously I'm going to favor ideas that maintain the stability of the sport. And things like Brian suggested, across-the-board financial benefits that every player can enjoy, even if it's not, sort of a perfect free market solution, it is the kind of thing that I think could help maintain the stability. A couple more here. Let me do YouTube. I haven't been on YouTube yet. They're going to be mad. So let me bounce over here for a second. And don't forget, we will do comments during the show tomorrow. I'll do a live chat on both Facebook and YouTube tomorrow, so that'll be a lot of fun. Frank Patterson asking about the Delp is a dog. I meant to mention this during the regular show. The Delp is a dog campaign that got started yesterday. I saw Jordan Davis do this. I saw John Fitzpatrick do this. Saw a lot of UGA players kind of get involved in the Delp is a dog. I guess trend. I don't know if it quite trended, but it was certainly a trending topic among UGA players yesterday. Now, that was not a commitment announcement. It was just a fun thing that Georgia players got involved with. Delp has been taking a lot of visits as of late, and I think he was recently at South Carolina. South Carolina's tried to be a factor in his recruitment. So I don't know if the Fitzpatrick, Jordan Davis, and what other players talked about this. I don't know how much of that was a response to any of that, or just the fact that Oscar's kind of gotten to know a lot of these guys pretty well, I guess, and a lot of that could be kind of related to that. But there was some fun on that yesterday for sure. Tennille Calvino asked about Cover 4. No, we don't have the full team in place tonight. So Cover 4, I'm guessing, will return next week. And then pretty soon it'll be back every single week. But tonight, no Cover 4. Mike's on vacation. Let's see what else. Big O, Frank Patterson, Darnell Washington also tweeted about Oscar Delp there as well. So that's kind of nice to see. Wally Smith, good to see you in the comment section. Wally, I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. Richard D says, in your opinion or through your research, do you believe that name, image, likeness will affect the recruiting of new players at Georgia? I mean, I think that to the extent that it impacts or affects Georgia at all, it's probably for the positive, right? I mean, I think this is a really tough time to be in a place like Pullman, Washington. I think this is a really tough time to be in a place like, outposts like that, which are not closely connected to big metropolitan areas. I mean, Georgia can obviously sell its proximity to Atlanta and kind of everything that comes with that. That Georgia can obviously kind of offer that up in a way that other programs just kind of can't. So how true does it end up being? How many guys truly do cash in on their their value, their brand, for lack of a phrase, because of all this, that remains to be seen. But the fact that that Georgia can say, hey, look how close we are to this big major market. Look how much big media, for instance, DawgNation. There aren't very many websites, very many digital brands like DawgNation as close to an SEC school or a big college football program is, and that's the kind of thing that Georgia probably can sell. Of, hey, you can really get a big platform to introduce yourself to the rest of the world here. And so, yeah, I do think that's probably part of Georgia's pitch. I think everyone's going to try to make a similar pitch, and you have to let the cards, fall where they may. But I guess the shortest answer to your question is, I certainly don't think anything about the new name, image, likeness laws and trends that are taking effect today. I don't think there's anything about this that puts Georgia at a disadvantage. I guess I'd say it that way. West Georgia Dog fan asking about the honor reserve deal that Vandegrift and Podlesny and some of the non-football players had signed. Details of these kinds of things are not going to really be readily available, and there's no obligation for for the company to make any kind of announcement on that. The players there as well. So for the most part, the private details of just what the players are gaining from all of this, for the most part, that's going to be kind of kept private. John Quick, looking forward to seeing some UGA commitments. Could be on the way there for sure. Foster Moss says the Hawks win the NBA championship to open the door for the Braves and the Bulldogs. I mean, I'll tell you this. If the Hawks were to win an NBA title, then truly anything is possible beyond that. Truly anything is possible after that. Ace Dog, thanks for watching us live today. I'm glad to have you here. Glad you're getting some time off from work as well. Texas Dog says, DawgNation Tailgate for Georgia home games. Yeah, we've done that kind of thing before, and obviously we look forward to being in Athens each and every Saturday, and who knows what kind of announcements we may be able to make in the days to come. Jordan Bowman says Georgia Tech is going to benefit from this as much as some of y'all are going to hate to admit it. They're rebranding themselves already. I mean, you can say I'm a hater if you want to, but Jeff Collins has been pushing this like 404 thing. Has anybody bought into this whatsoever? I mean, I don't mean to be a jerk, but is this moving the needle for anybody? I mean, they are. They're right smack dab there in Atlanta. And I'll tell you, night game in that stadium with the buildings in the background is not a bad look necessarily, but, Tech's like the fifth most popular team in Atlanta, at least. I mean, there are at least 4 or 5 teams in that city more popular than Georgia Tech, and recruits notice that kind of thing there as well.
The take you're looking for is Jeff Collins is just Jeremy Pruitt in blue.
Yeah, I mean, so I get where Jordan's coming from. He's a Clemson guy, and certainly Tech has tried to position itself as like the Atlanta team. There are more Alabama fans in Atlanta. There are more Auburn fans in Atlanta. There's clearly more Georgia fans in Atlanta. They're like a half dozen teams that have more fans in Atlanta than Georgia Tech does.
Like, the idea of Tech football makes a lot of sense. It should be good. Mm-hmm. But I think Collins stepped into a really impossible situation where you have to turn around a program that was doing things a certain way for so long, and that's difficult to do. And when you talk up and have the gusto that he kind of has, like guys like Pruitt, I would say Kirby did as well, even Lane Kiffin. When you win, I think, 6 games in your first 2 seasons, it makes it harder to keep saying that. And so now you enter year 3, which is a year, realistically, you should start to have the sort of things in place to where you can start progressing. You enter this year with a ton of pressure, and if things don't go well again this year, and they might not, you're looking at year 4 as in, like, if we don't make real significant improvements, this could be his last year there.
Yeah, I mean, they get the running back from Dalton, which was a good pickup. You get the transfer from Florida along the defensive line, Antonius Clayton. Quarterback from Milton a couple of years ago. I mean, they're doing what they should be doing. They're frankly doing what Paul Johnson should have been doing more of. Paul Johnson's best team was a team almost exclusively recruited by Chan Gailey. Johnson's recruiting efforts were so inept. There's no doubt that Jeff Collins is a better recruiter than Paul Johnson was, but man, it's hard to out-recruit South Carolina in Atlanta for Georgia Tech. I mean,
and like that's the thing they have to ultimately get to, because Georgia can recruit anyone in the country, and so they don't feel the need to rely on Georgia in the manner that they necessarily need to. Like Tech, I think if they wanted to, and I don't blame Collins for going the 404 route and trying to position them as like a cool Atlanta school, but their issue is they got to start beating out the South Carolinas, the Tennessees, because even Jeremy Pruitt last year was doing really well in the state of Atlanta.
Yeah.
And I can call it a state of Atlanta because they have so many players there, more than a lot of states. And so the reality is I think this Georgia Tech program is still very much, as successful as Paul Johnson was, is still very much paying for the sins of his program.
Yeah, I mean, think about how many guys that Clemson's gotten a loan from, just like, say, Roswell High School. Like, just at one school, that ought to be, Roswell ought to be something of a Tech school, and, Clemson kind of gets right of first refusal at a place like that. Hey, real quick, Connor, before you turn the mic off. So G. Grace, Bama boy, I think he's joking, but he says he's about to, basically start Venmoing Alabama players. Is that legal or not?
That is illegal. That is not legal.
So why is it not?
Because that is pay for direct. You are essentially paying them because they go to the University of Alabama, as opposed to a service that they are providing. The players themselves have to provide a service.
But I did notice this, and listen, I'm openly, admittedly confused about some of this. I did notice that the recent guidance the NCAA sent out, as thin as it was, in some of the response that it was made known that there was nothing prohibiting a true out-and-out booster from doing a name, image, likeness deal with a player, as long as there's some sort of return value coming back.
There is a return service. For example, I think you've seen some guys say, hey, we'll give you Instagram shout-outs for $20 to $50 or something along the lines of that. There has to be a return service. You can't just blow up these dudes' Venmos just because they happen to be players for Alabama. Unless G. Grace is somehow the deepest of deep agents and is now going to start using NIL as a way to get Alabama players in trouble. But that is something that you cannot do, and the players could not accept that money.
You know how sometimes rando dudes will promote stuff on Twitter? Just every now and then you'll see a promoted tweet. It's like, why is this promoted? It would be kind of funny if all of a sudden people are reaching out to players for a little bit of a signal boost for some of their regular social media stuff or something like that. But it is a weird world in which we live. All right, a couple more comments. We're going to get ready to wrap up for today. And don't forget, I will comment with you live during the show tomorrow. Not saying that's some great draw. I'm just saying hopefully we'll have a good time and have some fun together. Barry Kane says, I wonder if the government is going to try to get their cut from taxing these college players. I mean, the answer to that question is yes.
They're going to tax every American. That's how it works.
and here's the thing, too. This is why you got to be really careful. And I said before, it's not my intention to say this as a way of saying, and this is why we don't need to have any kind of name, image, likeness at all. That's not what I'm saying. But you do have to be really careful about this, that there is no second chance with the IRS. It's not one of those things of, you're just a kid, you didn't know. That is not how they operate. That's not how they operate. Anybody who's ever kind of run afoul of any kind of tax issue knows they come for their money. And this is a small amount of money, so it's not going to be that big of a deal. But this is not one of those things they're just going to kind of give you a little bit of a noogie on the head and say, that's okay, you didn't know, we'll forgive you this time. That's not the way they do.
I will say, we talk about exploiting the virtues of college, the college process, learning how to do things. I know people are worried about them paying taxes and whatnot, but isn't them learning how to do that, especially at maybe even a younger age, because it's just not straight up not taught, and I think these schools are going to take it upon themselves to do this, to teach these guys how to go through it. Is that not maybe a hidden potential value, that to give these guys financial literacy maybe early on in their careers, as opposed to leaving them to figure it out on their own later?
Yeah,
I can tell you, as someone who had to fill out a lot of 1099s when they were getting their start in this industry, it's not fun, and it was something that I kind of wish I had known how to do.
Well, I mean, there's also plenty of people who might like for young people to find out just how much this money does exit that check in taxes. But on a more serious note, I mean, I do think it's a good chance to learn a lesson, because I can tell you this, before I started working at DawgNation, for a number of years, every paycheck I got was a 1099 style check, and they don't take anything out of that. I mean, it is just the money, and it's up to you to figure out how much you owe, how much you're supposed to pay, and things like that. So there clearly is a lesson learned from that. I guess the one horror story I will point to is, is I'm not so much worried about a player getting too much trouble from a tax situation because the tax bill for most of these guys isn't going to be very high. I am a little bit worried about a player somewhere. I doubt this happens at Georgia. I am worried about a player somewhere getting involved in a situation where, whoops, all of a sudden they've accidentally broken the law. And, the example that I used in the show one day is, okay, you sign a thing to be an autograph guy, but frankly, signing a bunch of autographs is pretty tedious and boring. So all of a sudden the guy says, well, just don't worry about that. Just sign this thing one time. We'll put it in an auto pen and then we'll sign all the rest of the autographs via that auto pen. You've now broken the law. That's fraud for the people who paid for your autograph. So that's the thing I worry about more than anything else is not the person who accidentally doesn't pay their taxes. You should. They'll come after if you don't, but it's a small amount of money. You just got to be very careful that in the midst of making yourself some money, you don't accidentally break the law because it's a little easier to do than you might think.
I really hope we don't have player X involved in pyramid scheme.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. But here's the thing we know. Every scam, every con that has ever existed always starts the same way, as a way of making the person money who gets involved with it. That's why you got to be really careful here. All the cons that have ever happened, Nigerian prince, everything else, it starts with, hey, you're going to get really rich by doing this. And that's where you just got to be really, really careful.
Young people these days don't get the Nigerian prince reference.
Oh, is that right? Is that
yeah,
not a thing
I've used
anymore?
that with a couple of friends sometimes, and like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, that's like an iconic, like, you're getting scammed bit. Like, how did that get lost in the transition from generation to generation?
Maybe the next generation really is smarter than if that's not a thing that works on them anymore, because that was a real thing for a really long time. All right, over here on YouTube, really, really quick. And we'll get ready to wrap up for today and then pre-record a Friday show. Jordan Bowman, I agree with him. I've said this a million times, that the most prestigious rivalry in college football, you could debate whatever that is. And we talked about Georgia-Florida and where that rivalry stands on today's show, what people are saying about that. But there are no two entities in the world that hate each other more than Ole Miss hates Mississippi State. And the reason why is in a rivalry like Georgia-Florida, and even in some cases the Iron Bowl, there's this thought that the people who are at the corridors of power within the two schools are kind of above it. I truly don't think Kirby Smart likes Dan Mullen, but he's not going to ever say that publicly because I think that Kirby Smart, probably rightly so, but I think that Kirby Smart believes that that's not what people in his position should be doing. There don't seem to be the same level of misgivings about Ole Miss and Mississippi State. We've seen the athletic directors get involved. I mean, there's institutional hatred for those two schools, and it's one of the reasons why the Egg Bowl is so much fun. I'm not proud of it. It's a little bit like watching an episode of Jerry Springer, but I do love the way they go back and forth with each other. So I kind of agree with Jordan on that. One or two more. Triple Diesel weighing in on that there as well. HR picking stuff. No fan of the cryptocurrency. Nature Gator upset with Connor over something involving Emory Jones. Larry Goldberg says 1099 versus employee needs to be explained to every kid. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right about that. And listen, this is 1,000 times deeper than you should, get into. But like where a lot of media people learn is real estate agents, for the most part, the same way. People who are kind of paid through contract work, independent contractor type work, is for the most part you end up setting yourself up as a corporation. And this is not tax advice. You should seek your own counsel on this. But for a lot of people, setting yourself up as a corporation as a way of getting paid ends up being, for some people, a good thing. As I said before, this is not tax advice. Seek your own independent counsel on that. But that's what, for some people, they end up doing. Anything else? Cody Ledoux says they should have Life 101 in high school that shows taxes, savings, 401ks, and such. It's pretty sad that we don't teach our future how actual money works. And I do think that's true, that there are just certain things that, like, I've always said there's a difference between education and information, and that on a day-to-day basis, I end up using information more so than I use education, which is not to say that education is bad, but it's information gleaned from experience ends up being more valuable for me than the actual education that you got sometimes in a classroom. And as Cody points out to, all the ways in which, saving impacts you, 401ks impact you. I mean, listen, it is very easy when it comes to an investment situation to think you're doing the right thing, and you end up losing so much money in fees that you end up not quite making what you thought you're supposed to make through all of this. Once again, that's not investment advice. You should seek your own counsel. But there's a lot of life stuff that is just really hard to teach in a classroom, or not. Maybe it's not hard. Maybe it just doesn't happen. But I think that Cody's, for the most part, onto something there. All right, we're going to get ready to go here. By the way, good to see Tennille Calvino migrating over to YouTube. It will be interesting to see this tomorrow. So I'm going to try to comment during the show. I guess the over-under on what time I get locked out of Facebook for spam, because it seems like Facebook's had some issue with that as of late. So let's find out if I get kicked off of Facebook tomorrow for spam. Mike Mazzell says he's playing at the Golden Horseshoe Golf Course in Williamsburg, Virginia. Boy, Mike, that's a great weekend. Good for you. That's awesome to hear. Jermaine King says he wants to buy a Darnell Washington Big O t-shirt. That's the other thing, too, and I promise we're going to leave. So this is tedious, but I'll say here for a moment, that the screen printing industry has kind of changed a lot the last few years. It used to be like when Devin Bellamy was selling his Humble Yourself t-shirts, that's his circa 2017, back then, for the most part, you had to print a bunch of t-shirts because it was cost prohibitive to print just a few. You can't print one as you sell it. You have to print them and then hope you sell them all, which is a little bit of a capital risk. Now, screen printing has changed. This is one of the reasons why, if you watch Barstool or something like that, they have all these T-shirts, or a lot of these media companies now have 1,000 different T-shirts you can buy. The reason why they have so many T-shirts is it's just easier to print T-shirts than it used to be. That you can print them more as you sell them, and you don't have to have a warehouse full of T-shirts waiting to be purchased. And so that is kind of the cool thing about. I know Kendall Milton has made an announcement about his own apparel that's being sold here now too. 5 years ago, you could not do this. 5 years ago, if you wanted to sell blah, blah, blah player t-shirt, or let's not say 5, let's just say a few years ago, however many years ago it was. If you wanted to sell blah, blah, blah player t-shirt, you'd have to print all those t-shirts up and then hope that you did sell them, and you have to house them somewhere. You'd be in the hole big on before you even sold one, and the first X number of t-shirts you sold are simply trying to get you back to even. Technology is just different now. It's a lot easier to sell t-shirts print t-shirts as they're sold. You don't have to have a lot of inventory, things like that. Once again, that's kind of deep in the weeds, but it is an example of how Big O t-shirts, Kendall Milton t-shirts, Zeus t-shirts, whatever kind of t-shirt you want to think of for a Georgia player, it's easier to have that available for sale without having to have a warehouse full of those t-shirts waiting to be sold. All right, let's go for now. Good stuff. Thanks for being here. We will see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. Also, don't forget to check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Game 5, Milwaukee tonight. Hawks looking for just an enormous win tonight. Obviously, the health situation of Trae Young and Giannis is a big factor in all of this. So important updates all day long at AJC.com as you follow that from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Also getting ready for the big Independence Day weekend. What's happening around the city? AJC always good about keeping us up to date on all that there as well. Big thanks to R.S. Andrews. Air conditioning unit, there's nothing that'll ruin a 4th of July weekend more than a hot house. So if you're worried about your air conditioning unit, get it tuned back up, factory fresh specs, rsandrews.com. They will do that for you today. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. If you're off and enjoying the Memorial Day weekend, hope it's a great one for you. We'll see you back here again tomorrow. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.